Hey, what's up? I'm a diagnosed narcissist, but before I say the things that I'm going to say, keep in mind that I am not a licensed professional. So, with that out of the way, this is the video, yep, that I said I would make if you saw my last video, which is more of my perspective on God as a diagnosed narcissist. I mean, apart from just believing that any arguments for God are completely illogical and can easily be debunked. I would also say that as a narcissist, I think the pretty straightforward and simple answer as to why I would be hesitant to believe in a God away from even an intellectual point of view is simply just, well, honestly, I would rather look at myself as God rather than acknowledge that there is a God, because from the way I see it, believing in a God requires you to be self-servient, which is why I actually really like the last video I made, if you haven't seen it, where I talk about borderlines coming off like, it would easily be the kind of dynamic that anyone who chooses to believe in God could easily fall through in similarity to people with borderline personality disorder. So, yeah, this notion where I have to be subservient to, if you ask me, a completely made up being is just completely absurd. And I see it as a cope that people simply can't deal with the fact that we live in a natural material world, and oh, it, bugs them because it makes them feel so sad and disappointed. They can't deal with the fact that life is actually super shallow and all of this is for nothing. I mean, they say that you should enjoy life because it could be gone in an instant. And no matter how much I try to think of that, I mean, I get it. But then again, I don't, because kind of like what I just said, this is all for nothing and it doesn't really matter. So I've been doing some thinking in terms of why, for me, with narcissistic personality disorder, the belief in God is just, so off putting. In my last video, I even mentioned Adam and Eve, and, it's a clear place on the hierarchy, which for some reason you can get attacked for as a narcissist, but if you call it God, it's simply okay. Because what did God forbid? Eating from the tree of knowledge, I believe. So, God doesn't want anybody being better than him. So, this is clearly what I've noticed. We know that we ourselves as human beings are flawed and are not perfect. So, exactly in that video, I said God just comes across as a manifestation of all the insecurities that humanity simply has. So let's go with the first. Essentially, humans are not omnipotent. Obviously, we're very, limited in the things that we're capable of doing. So to imagine that there's a being like God, oh wow, how convenient. And another thing is we have gaps in our knowledge. So another thing to project onto God is omniscience. And oh wow, this being suddenly, cares about us. How convenient is that? Because it's hilarious to me that supposedly God created the world, the universe, and everything as like his creation and like we're all his children, but essentially God is basically just the embodiment of all the characteristics that humans basically fail and are completely insecure at. So sure, we don't like arrogance in other people, but if we project a made up being that is supposedly beyond time and space, then oh, suddenly it's okay. Suddenly that being is okay to, belittle us, and we need the forgiveness of that being because oh, we're sinners, oh, we know we're worthless or whatever, and all this kind of stuff. Which, if that's the case, I actually kind of find that pretty stupid, because I don't see how you couldn't just acknowledge that even like without a god. Because as a narcissist, I can admit that I'm also like pretty self-loathing. I don't need a god to look at myself as somebody, very imperfect and, very much flawed. So I think there is a lot of like irony going on here, because then again, aren't you no different than me? Because if you do look up a lot of things about like NPD, it's mentioned that narcissists like being with people in like a certain rank or like a certain group. So how could this not be any more perfect, in the belief in God? We see ourselves as low and we have all of these like deficits, but oh wow, there's a savior out there. There's a immaterial beyond space and time, like savior out here. But that's just you refusing to, like, acknowledge how surface level and stupid this life actually is. Like, we're plopped here out of nowhere just because our parents decided to like bring us like into existence, and all that's here is this like material and like physical stuff that we all experience through. But oh, naturalism is too depressing of a philosophy to people. Materialism is too depressing of a philosophy for people. So how about we just create like something that can only exist in our mind because we have the intellectual capacity to make stuff up. We have the intellectual capacity to, mentally masturbate and whatnot. So then here comes this idea of God. So once you project all your worries and then once you can pray, like honestly, at least in a way it makes me think to myself that like I'm more down to earth, because when I deal with my insecurities, I'm actually dealing with my insecurities. I'm reflecting them back on myself. Whatever I may not like about myself, I don't have to project onto some like made up being in order to like feel better about myself. I actually accept those flaws. Well, I mean, half and half, I'll admit. I keep switching between superiority and inferiority, but like at least at times when I definitely do feel inferior, I fully accept that about myself, which I kind of find extremely ironic when I look at like religious people, because they're the ones that constantly keep saying, "Oh, you must open your heart to God. You have to be able to like humble yourself." Well, I'm just like, okay, how about you humble yourself then? The next time you feel the need to pray because things aren't going well in your life, ask yourself why you suck. Find out why you actually suck. You don't need to project it onto like some made up being that you're just, using to cope. Just basically, using to cope because you can't deal with the fact that like you're pointless and none of this actually, matters at all. So I'm not sure what else to add, but I guess I'll just leave it right there. That is one narcissist's thoughts on religion.